Taking cuttings is a way to make more plants for your garden. The new plant will be an almost identical copy of the parent plant. I say almost because occasionally, if you take enough cuttings, small variations do occur that lead to something called clonal variation. Taking cuttings is the only way to reproduce a hybrid plant because it wouldn't come true from seed. So that means that every single specimen that you would find of a plant like this Griselinia littoralis Bantry Bay is descended from just one single original plant. I don't actually need any more cuttings of that Griselinia because I've only got room in the garden for the one, but I would like some more cuttings of this fuchsia to give me some summer colour. The type of cutting that you take depends on the time of year and the stage of growth on the plant. The growth on this fuchsia is all young, soft, so I'm going to take softwood or soft tip cuttings. When I'm taking cuttings, I like to use a pair of bypass secateurs rather than the blade and anvil type where the blade comes down onto the soft metal, because that can crush the stems and you don't always get good rooting. With these you get a clean, sharp cut, so make sure they're nice and clean when you start to use them. So I want to get 5 or 6 cuttings off this plant, and I'm going to go round it first, taking the shoots off and cutting just above a leaf joint. Cut just a few millimetres above the leaf joint and any shoots that are coming from it, so that if there's any dieback on that little stub, it doesn't do any harm to the actual buds here. Now I know this looks a bit brutal, does look a little bit scalped, but it's going to make this plant into a nice bushy dome for the summer that should be covered in flowers. When it comes to preparing your cutting, the plant itself actually has chemicals that help the rooting, and they're concentrated at the point where the leaves leave the stem and the new bud forms. So it makes sense to make use of these when you're trying to put the roots on it. So we're going to trim the cutting, and then I'm going to remove these lower leaves and the small shoot that's growing there next to it, because they would rot in the compost and that could affect the rooting capability of the whole cutting. Now I'm going to dip the base into some rooting hormone powder, and the reason I've tipped it into a little saucer like this is because you only want to use a tiny amount and it does go off. So if you tip out a small amount, use as much as you need during the day and then throw it away. It keeps the powder in the container clean and free from contamination, ready for next time. So I'm going to just dip the very base in, the cut base, and then tap off any excess. Then I'm going to just push it into the compost, not make a hole with a dibber, just push it in so that it's got good contact with the compost all around the cutting. Here we are. I actually got 4 usable cuttings off that plant, and they're all in the pot. The next thing to do is water them. Watering them in settles the compost around the cutting base and makes sure that there's good contact all around the base so that the new roots aren't rooting into fresh air. Make sure you label your plants by putting one label to the pot. Finally, I'm going to cover the pot of cuttings with an opaque plastic bag. And the reasoning behind this is that it keeps the level of humidity inside high. It's making a mini greenhouse, if you like. It reduces the stress on the cuttings as they root, and it should make them root quicker. Put the bag in place with an elastic band so that it's nice and snug, and then stand it in a well-lit place out of direct sunlight until the cuttings start to root, which should be around about 6 weeks. Then it's time to move them out into individual pots of their own. Once they've rooted, you'll find that they develop a root system like this cutting has here, and they can be potted up individually to grow on. There you go, plants for free.